Eat, sleep, bet, repeat. That's how we get down on the opening line at EliteSportsBetting.com. I'll be your host, Benny Ricciardi, and we're going to start today by talking a little bit about what's going on in the world. A week ago today, we were doing an NBA video. Thursday of last week, we did an XFL video. Friday of last week, the sports world as we know it pretty much changed. And, one of the things that I think helps people get through abnormal times is, injecting a little bit of normality back into it. So we're still going to be coming through with these videos for you. Obviously, without a lot of the sports world going on right now, there isn't going to be a ton for us to talk about. But one thing that we do still have that we can still bet on here is horse racing. And horse racing's actually been one of my loves my entire life. So what I'm going to do here today is kind of give you guys a little bit of breakdown of how to read the daily racing form. This way, if you are, stuck home and looking to do something to get a little bit of action and put a little bit of normalcy back in your life, you'll have an idea of what's going on. So what I've decided to do today, the daily racing form every day is, the daily racing form is one of the, main places where sports bettors or, horse handicappers go to get their information. Every day they put out what's called a free past performance. They pick one race and they give you the past performance for free. They kind of have their experts talk about it a little bit. What I'm going to do is kind of use that free past performance that they put out every day to kind of explain to you guys how to even bet on horses and what are the things that you're looking for, how to be able to read the daily racing form. This way, if you do decide that you want to get a little bit of action, throw a little bit of money around and, kind of forget about what's going on in the world, which is something that a lot of us use sports for to begin with, you'll still be able to do it even in these trying times. So let me start this screen share here, make sure that we're able to pull this off. So we should have a copy of the daily racing form up. No, wait, hold on. Let me double check on that. I'm getting used to using this new technology too here. All right, so now you guys should start to see the free pass performance for the daily racing form that they offer. So what we're going to do is just kind of walk you guys through everything, starting right up here at the top. So right up here at the top, you're going to see the first thing is Will Rogers Downs R9. So that is the track. Will Rogers Downs is the racetrack that we're talking about here. R9 means this is the past performance for the 9th race on the card today. The next thing they're going to tell you is the distance of the race. So this says dirt 6 furlongs. Now, there's two ways that, basically races are run in this country. Usually they're either run on a dirt surface or on the turf, which is like basically the grass. 6 furlongs is the length of the race. So 8 furlongs equals about a mile. So 6 furlongs would be about 3/4 of a mile is what they're going to be running here. And then the next thing is the condition of the race. This is an allowance race. So basically all horses start off in maiden races if they've never had a victory before. Usually the path is you win your maiden race and then you go on to an allowance races. And usually what that means is, you're allowed to have no other wins other than being in, those maiden races. Certain ones will have different conditions. This one says N2Y, which is a non-winner of 2 races in a year. So this is one of those different ones there. You see that little F that's standing there next to the allowance? That actually means fillies, which means that this is a race for female horses. Next to that, you'll see the purse of the race, something that you don't really need to worry about as a bettor. This is basically for the owners of the race, depending on where your horse finishes, you get a percentage of that overall purse. That's how they make their money to be able to, to afford to pay for racehorses, because owning racehorses is not a cheap thing there. And then underneath, it tells you the different wagers that are available on this race. So you have exacta, quinella, trifecta, superfecta, and this is the first half of the late daily double. So let's go through what all those mean. Exacta basically means you have to pick the horse that comes in first place and second place in the exact order. Trifecta is first, second, and third. Superfecta is first, second, third, and fourth. These are actually some of the bets that we call exotics in the horse racing world. These are the way that you could really make a big score. So, you bet $5 on a horse to win at 3-1 and he wins, you're going to make $15. You bet $5 on an exactor that pays $60 or $70, you're going to walk away with a $150, $200 profit on the day. Those are the ones that, you can really make a decent score, turn a little bit of money into a big amount of money. The trifectas, where you have to go first, second, and third, are obviously even harder to hit. So that would be something that usually pays out even better, exponentially better, to be honest with you. And the same thing with the superfecta, where you have to go first, second, third, and fourth place. So these are all ways to make a big score if you're playing, the horses. The other thing is the first half of the late daily double. So a daily double means you have to pick the winner of this race and the winner of the next race as well. You also see pick threes, pick fours, pick sixes. Same concept there. You have to pick the winner of 3 races in a row, 4 races in a row, or 6 races in a row. These are very hard to hit because, you basically have to have, in order to cover it the way you really want to, you have to play a lot of horses and a lot of combinations, and it gets expensive very quick. So people try to keep the ticket small, and sometimes they'll hit 2 or 3 out of a pick 3, or you'll have one half of a daily double. You got to hit both halves in order to get paid, and there's usually some pretty decent payouts here. The payouts usually go in line with how much money you have to, basically have to spend in order to get it done. So when if you hit a pick 3 that has a bunch of favorites in it, it's not really going to pay all that much money. If you hit a pick 3 that, has a whole bunch of horses that aren't favorites in it, then you could actually wind up taking a couple $1,000s away. So let's go and kind of break down what all these numbers here mean. So basically you look down here, we'll go with the first horse here, the number 1 horse in this race, Country Daisy. So the name of the horse is Country Daisy, obviously, and the 1 is the number of the horse in the race. ML right here is the morning line. So this horse is 12-1 on the morning line. Remember, horse racing is a pari mutual field. So as money gets put into these pools, that number is going to change. If a lot of money's bet on him, it's going to go down to 6-1. If nobody's betting on his horses, it could go up to 20-1, 25-1. Next to it there, it tells you, what color the horse is. CH is chestnut right here. It tells you that it's a female horse. F is for filly. It tells you the age of the horse, 4 years old, and the month that she was born. The sire and the dam are the mother and the father. In horse racing, breeding and genetics are something that play a lot into it. There are certain horses that, are just predisposed to being able to run longer distance. There are other ones that are predisposed to being really good sprinters out of the gate. So you try to, look at some of that. It's not a direct line because you never know if, there are horses who have been champion sprinters whose, progeny have gone on and won some of the longest route races. And there are guys who've been great running a long distance whose, progeny wind up being really good in 6 furlong sprint races. So it's definitely not something where you can say, oh, well, his dad was good here, he's going to be good here too. But it is something where you could say, if somebody was a superior athlete, their children are probably going to be superior athletes. Think about LeBron James and Bronny right now. Pretty much the same concept when it comes to horses. Underneath is the breeder. That's just the name of the person who actually bred this horse. Again, nothing really big that you guys need to know there. The J and the TR here are more important. This is the jockey and this is the trainer. So certain trainers are better at certain things, whether it be turf races or sprint races. Some trainers are really good. If you look down here with the trainer stats, turf to dirt means a horse that ran his last race on turf, on the grass, switching over to dirt. And what it shows you down here is the percentage. So he's had 16 horses that have done that turf to dirt switch. He's won 13% of the time with them. If you bet $2 on him every single time he was doing this, it would have returned $1.99. So slightly unprofitable, but basically even. But then you look at some of the other stuff, route to sprint, meaning a horse that's running a mile or longer, going to a horse that's running a mile or shorter. He's done that 20 times. He's won 20% of the time, 4 out of 20, which is pretty good. And of those 4 times that he won, if you bet $2 every time on him, of those 20 times, you would have returned $3.59, which would be like basically an 80% profit on it. So definitely a profitable angle for a trainer like this. So then let's look at the running lines, because that's the last thing you guys really need to understand. So the first line here that you're looking at, 15 February 26 Houston, that basically tells you the date of the last race, what race number it was, and what track it was at. So that was at Sam Houston right there. RP, I think, is Remington Park. You'll see, BEL for Belmont and CD for Churchill Downs and, SA for Santa Anita. Those are some of the bigger tracks around the country that people might be more familiar with. The next thing here, FM, FST, MY, this tells you basically what the condition of the course was. So on turf, if it's firm, that's usually a good thing. If you look underneath it where you see fast, that means that he ran on the dirt track and the dirt track was fast. You go down here, though, and you'll see MY there. Sometimes you'll see SLY. MY means that the track was very muddy. SLY means that the track was very sloppy. They do run even if it rains, although a lot of horses will scratch out, or some horses, at least in the races, will scratch out. But even if it rains, they do run. So what they're basically saying here is, the track was muddy this day, or the track was sloppy this day. And anybody who's ever been out and running on, mud, as opposed to running on, say a a paved sidewalk or a blacktop, you know you're going to run a lot slower in the mud because it's a lot quicker to pick your feet up. So when you look at the times for that, you always got to account for the fact that, you know, he wasn't running on the in the ideal conditions on the perfect track there. So the next thing you're going to see is you're going to see 4 columns worth of numbers. And what these are is these are the times of the leader at certain points of call. So for example, this is this race right here that we're looking at the top was a 1 mile race. So the 23 seconds was how fast the leader ran the first quarter of that race. The 47 is the half mark. The 112 is the 3/4 mark. And then the 137 is the final time. When you look down at a 6 furlong race here down at the bottom, so the second one from the bottom that's raced from October, 21 seconds is the quarter, 45 seconds is the half. But then since they're only running 6 furlongs, they're not going to give you the 3/4 and the final because that's going to be the same time. So this is actually the 5/8 number, that 57. And then the final time is always the last number, so the 111 right there. So this tells you how fast the horse that won the race ran it, not exactly the horse that we're looking at here. So now we go over to the next thing here, and you'll see things like OC's 30K N1X. So that's an optional claiming race, which is what he ran in. If you move down a little bit, you'll see the little S in the box right there. That means it's a stakes race. A stakes race is kind of like the biggest races that they run right here. The Kentucky Derby is a stakes race, and you know, the Preakness, the Belmont. I'm trying to think of races that you guys would definitely know. All the stuff in the Breeders' Cup, those are all stakes races. But they aren't the only stakes races. I mean, those are the big ones where the prize pool is $1 million. But on any given day at a racetrack, you'll have a stakes race or two that pays like 70,000 or 100,000, and that's what this race was here. Usually, the horses that are running in a stakes race are pretty good horses, which gives you a little bit of an idea of the caliber of a horse that's kind of running. Underneath, you'll see ALW. That's the allowance races, kind of like the one that he's running in here today. Again, you have to break your maiden. You have to be a winner to be in those allowance races. So usually you got some pretty decent horses there. Claiming is like the lowest, the bottom. CLM, claiming is like the lowest level at a racetrack. These are horses that, you know, based on the name claiming, you could actually go to the racetrack, and if you have $20,000 and have it in an account and have some kind of trainer who's there willing to do the claim for you, you could actually buy this racehorse right after his race is over, and he could actually be yours. That's actually what a claiming race is here. So these are horses that the owners don't mind if somebody takes off their hands because they don't think they have much of a future. So these are usually the lowest levels of races that you see at a racetrack. Also, some of the most unpredictable, because if these horses were good and they were consistent, you know, the owner probably wouldn't be so willing to get rid of them. So the next thing here, if you take one thing away from this video, the next set of numbers here, the 59 in green, the 70, the 64, the 77, all the way down, this is probably the one thing that could help you the most with your handicapping. These are called speed figures. And speed figures is something I wanted to talk about a little bit today because, you know, a lot of guys here that use projection systems and projection models, you'll understand the concept behind speed numbers because that's basically what they are. So what they'll do is they'll take the winning times at a racetrack over the last 3 years, and they'll take the average winning time for, you know, different positions. They'll take the, you know, the fastest winning time becomes the par number, or 100. And then every other winning time is graded based off of that 100, based on how far away from meeting that, you know, expectation it was. So when you see horses that have a speed figure over 100, that basically means that they've been so fast that they've actually run faster than, you know, the average fastest times over the last 3 years at whatever racetrack you're running at, whatever distance you're looking at there. That's a pretty impressive thing to say. A lot of horses, depending on, you know, what level they'll be, you'll see horses that can run numbers very close to 100. Those are usually really good horses. The further below 100 you get is usually an exponential drop in how you're going. So you'll see a horse like this running mostly in the 60s, a couple 70s, a couple 50s there. But I would say that this is a racehorse that's consistently around the 60s is probably where you would look at for a horse like this. Excuse me. So what you really want to do is use these numbers to compare them to the other horses in the race. Now, horses under ideal conditions will give their best efforts. So if you look down to, let's see, like the number 2 horse here. Notice how he's mostly 60s, has a 70. I think he has this 185 that kind of looks like it stands out here for some reason. This is because he ran this race under ideal conditions. If you look over next to it, this is where the horse was located at every point in the race. And a lot of times when you see a horse who runs its ideal conditions, he's usually very close to the lead at the beginning and then just blows everybody away and comes off to a big victory, like this horse did by winning by 7 3/4 lengths at the end of the race. This is one of the things you got to look at is, you got to look and say, all right, that's his best possible effort there. And he ran it under ideal conditions against horses he was a lot better than because he beat them all by 7 lengths. I don't think the field today is as weak, so I don't think you're going to see him get that perfect trip. So you're probably looking at him more as a horse that should be running a lot of these other numbers we see, somewhere around the 60s and 70s. And that's basically the idea behind speed numbers. It's a way to take horses that have run at different tracks, at different distances, and kind of give them one all-encompassing number based off of the actual statistics there that kind of gives you an idea of how good the horse is. It doesn't mean the horse with the highest speed figures is always going to win. As you can see, these speed figures are not consistent. It's not like this horse runs out every single race and gives you a 70 on the dot, and all you got to do is find the horse with the highest speed number and he can win. You got to look at the picture as a whole. You got to look at horses that are in a good chance to run that. Has he been running it well lately? Sometimes you'll see a horse that, let's see if I can find one here. Like this horse is a good example, the 3 Broadway County. Back in November, he was running pretty well. He was running 60s pretty consistently. Since November, though, he's kind of fallen off a little bit, 40s, 20s, 41. So his speed numbers have really taken a hit. So if you're trying to guess what this guy's going to do today, you would have to say that it's more likely he's going to keep running those 40s that he's been running than it is that he's going to be running those 60s that he ran a while back. Is he capable of popping up for a big race? Absolutely. But his form doesn't really say that that's what he's doing right now. So you probably would discount a horse like this having some good races in his back form because his more recent form is pretty bad here. So anyway, that's the way you use speed numbers. They're a very important thing. I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about them. So then the next thing you're going to see here is when we talked about the numbers here, 23, 47, 112, 137, those were the times at certain points of calls. This number right here, the 5 with the little exponent, the 6 with the little exponent, the 7 with the little exponent, that is basically telling you what position the horse was in at those points of call. So at that first point of call at 23.5, this horse was in 5th place. And then a little exponent 3.5 means he was in 5th place and he was 3.5 horse lengths behind the leader. You look at the second point of call, 47 seconds. He was in 6th place, 5.25 behind the leader. And then it goes the same way, 3/4 all the way down to the end. The last number is where he finished. So he finished in 5th place, 8.5 lengths behind the leader. So what that means is when the horse in first place crossed the finish line, he was in 5th place, when the horse in first place crossed the finish line, he was 8.5 lengths behind that horse. So that really tells you how far out of first place that he was. And then the big number 5 tells you where he finished. He actually finished in 5th place. He was 8.5 behind the leader when the leader crossed the finish line. The number in the next row, that's who the jockey was on that race form. So you can see he has a different jockey riding him today. Whether or not that's going to make a difference, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The weight right here is the weight of the jockey. The L means that the horse was getting Lasix, which is a drug that they give them when they run. It kind of helps keep their breathing open so that they can breathe. It clears out the passageways basically for there. It is basically a steroid. It's one of the things that you'll hear some of the anti-horse people kind of complaining about there. And then the last thing here, 630. That's the price that he paid. So he was basically 630 to 1. Meaning if you bet $5 on this horse and he would have won the race, you probably would have won like $31.50 or something like that. The next number there, that's the speed figure, a different kind of speed figure, but along the same lines. You don't really need to know about that. And then the last thing here is this is the horses that came in first, second, and third in the race. If you look down to like the second one from the bottom, you'll see where it kind of looks like it's in italics here, where you look at Country Daisy right here. That means that horse came out and won one of the races since that race happened. Silver City Trick, another horse that was in that race, also won since this happened. When you see a race where there's a lot of horses that came in second or third that ended up winning their next race or winning another race after that, it makes this a key race. So sometimes you come in 4th place and the 3 people who beat you aren't very good and never wind up doing anything. And sometimes you come in 4th place and the horse that was in first won this race. The horse that was in second came back and won his next race. The horse that was in third came back and won his next race. So that fourth place finish is actually a lot more important than the fourth place finish of somebody who, lost to a bunch of horses that haven't won anything since they beat him. It gives you as a handicapper a little bit of an idea of saying, all right, maybe this horse is actually pretty good. He just happened to be in a race with a bunch of other horses who were a little bit better. So, this is a little bit of a weaker field than the one that he had here. Maybe this is the one that he could come out on top, because coming in fourth, the three other horses that won means that at the very least, this horse is, somewhat decent because he beat a bunch of other horses. And if those three winners weren't in that race, he might have been the winner of it. And then the last thing here is also the other thing I really wanted to get into today, and these are the notes. So you'll see it says things like settled, no menace, shuffled, bid four wide, late. What this really is 2 or 3 words that kind of give you an idea of how the horse ran, right? So when you see something that says like settled, no menace, that means that he just really wasn't involved. He wasn't really a factor in the race. Shuffled means that he was trying to move up and a couple horses kind of cut him off, so he had to kind of go back. Bid four wide, bid four W means bid four wide. So as they were coming around the turn, if you've ever watched a horse race, there'll be somebody closest to the rail and then everybody else is kind of on the outside of them. The further out you got to go, the longer you're actually running, which is going to affect your finish time. So when you see horses that ran 4 wide or 6 wide, sometimes you can expect them to improve a little bit on the next race if they get a better trip and they're not, stuck all the way out there. Because when you're turning, the further out you are on the turn, the longer you got to run to catch up there. And that could be something that affects, where you're going to finish. The things you really want to see are things like the bottom stuff, right? Like driving, willingly driving. That means that the horse ran well towards the end. When he was going and crossing the wire, he was doing it usually picking up steam or like looking really good while the other horses were falling back behind him. Those are the kind of things that tell you that that horse might be ready for another big outing. I like when I see that in the recent races. I don't like when he has that in his past, when he ran some of his better speed numbers. And then in the recent races, it says things like no menace or late or no menace. That's not really what you're looking for there. That doesn't really give you a lot of confidence in the horse. So basically, that's the breakdown of how to read the form. The only other thing you'll see up here, I do want to explain this as well. Pretty simple concept up here. You'll see a chart that has a whole bunch of numbers in it. So the first number up there, it says life 12, 4, 2, 1. So what that really means is in his lifetime, he's ran in 12 races. 4 times he came in first place, 2 times he came in second place, 1 time he came in third place. So if you add those up, 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. He ran in 12 races lifetime. So 7 of the 12 races he ran in his lifetime, he either came in first, second, or third, which we call win, place, or show. So he came in the money, win, place, or show, in 7 of his 12 lifetime races. That's a pretty good percentage. So this would be a pretty decent horse. There's some other, let me see if I can find one that has some pretty bad numbers here. Well, actually, all these horses, since this is an allowance race, are pretty good. But you'll see horses sometimes, it'll say like 27, 0, 2, and 5. That means that that horse ran 27 times. He's never won a race. He has 2 second-place finishes and 5 third-place finishes. So he's only been in the money 7 of 27 times, less than 25%. He's never won a race before. When you see things like that, that is not the kind of horse you want to bet on. That's a horse that you would probably be like, all right, I'm going to cross him off and look for somebody else in the race that can beat him and be better. The other things you see here, 2020, same concept with the numbers. That means in 2020, he's ran twice, no wins, 1 second place, 0 third places. 2019, that's obviously his record for 2019. Nine attempts, 4 wins, 1 second, 1 third. WRD is the name of this racetrack. So whatever racetrack you're at, you'll usually see that there at the bottom. So that's how many times he ran at this racetrack. So he's ran twice in his life here, won both races that he ran here. The other things on the right-hand side, DFST, normally when you run a race, it's run on the fast track like we talked about before. So that's just saying, this is what he's done in ideal conditions. His record is 10, 3, 2, and 1. That's how much money he's won in purse winnings, and that's his best speed figure. What is when we were talking before about things like the muddy track or the sloppy track, those would be put under the wet. That means if it's raining today, you really want to kind of take a peek at the wet number. The only problem here, as most statisticians will tell you, most of these horses don't have a huge sample size anyway, and their wet track sample size is even smaller. A lot of times they've ran once, like this horse has,
or at most maybe like 2 or 3 times on a wet track. So it's very tough to just kind of use that number and pull too much out of it. Synth underneath, there are some surfaces now that are no longer dirt. They're a synthetic surface. It's kind of like a rubber. Some people argue it's better for the horses. Some people argue it's worse. But they do actually run on them right now, so they keep track of that stat as well. Turf, as we mentioned before, is the grass, so that'll give you the horse's record on the grass. This horse the number one ran one time on the grass, did not come in win, place, or show mode. And then the last number, DST, is the distance. So again, horses will run a different distance. If you look at the distance numbers that we talked about earlier over here, you see 1 mile race, 1 mile race, 1 mile race, 6.5 furlongs, 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs. So I think this is a 6 furlong race today. If we look up, yeah, 6 furlong race today. So that's going to give you his record at the distance. Some horses like the shorter races, so they might have a really good record running 6 furlongs or 7 furlongs. But you look and you see their overall record might be crappy because maybe they ran a bunch of times at a mile or a mile and a half, which is not really what they do well. And because of that, they're not going to have a good record. So the distance record is something that's kind of important. It tells you, is this distance, is this type of race something that this horse usually does good in or has done good in his career. So there's a lot more to horse races and handicapping that we can get into. And we try to get into it over at the Vault on EliteSportsBetting.com. I'm trying to lay out some videos like this every day and also do some articles for our subscribers over there that'll give them a little bit of more of an understanding of how to bet on the horses. And then we've been sitting around in chat since that's about the only game left in town. I think we're down to MMA, some Russian soccer, horse racing, and esports is basically the 4 sports that we have available right now that we can bet on. So like I said, trying to give you guys a little bit of normalcy. You want to get some money down. You want to get some wagers in. Horse racing is a good way to look at it. Come join us over at EliteSportsBetting.com. We got the horse race chat room going on over there. Bunch of guys over there talking. I invited in a few of my friends who are handicappers as well. So you got a couple guys that actually know what they're talking about, along with a bunch of other guys who are just having a lot of fun, throwing some money around and betting and watching races. So that sums it up for our horse racing show today on The Opening Line. I'm your host, Benny Ricciardi. Thank you guys for joining us at EliteSportsBetting.com.